At this time, I will call the meeting of the Marshall City Council to order with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to welcome everyone here this evening. We have an agenda before us. We'll move to agenda item number 2, which is to consider any changes to that agenda. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections to that agenda?
Mr. Mayor, I do want to note a change. The consideration of the hotel tax abatement policy and the call for the public hearing would be a discussion information only item, not an action item tonight.
Okay, thank you. Any other changes to that agenda? Not, we'll operate under that agenda. We'll move to agenda item number 3, which is consider approval of the minutes of the last regular council meeting that was held on November 13th. The council does have the minutes of both of those meetings. Are there any corrections?
Move approval.
Second. Motion by Craig, seconded by Steve to approve the minutes as they have been presented. All those in favor say aye, or we'll move to a vote, excuse me.
Old school.
Motion passes. Agenda item number 4. Agenda item number 4 is a consent agenda. The items on the consent agenda include the 2019 wage schedule for temporary and seasonal employees, consideration of an amendment to the personnel policy appendix B, the maximum allowable reimbursement for per diem rates, consider the approval of the bills and project payments, and consider the application for a temporary on-sale liquor license for the Friends of the Orchestra Limited for an event to be held December 13, 2018. Is there any item on the consent agenda any member of the council wants to remove for purposes of separate discussion?
I move approval of the consent agenda.
I'll second. Motion by Craig, seconded by Jim. Discussion, was it Jim or was it David? David. Seconded by David. To approve the consent agenda items. Any discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 9 is consider the award of the bid for a pickup truck for the engineering department. Glenn, I'll turn to you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Jason Anderson.
First item, before we get to that, this was tabled at our last regular council meeting. I will entertain a motion to remove it from the table.
I'll make a motion to remove it from the table.
Second. Motion by Jim, seconded by Steve. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. We'll now consider the discussion or the presentation of request to purchase the pickup for the engineering department. Glenn.
Thank you, Mayor and
Glenn
Council.
Olson, Director of Public Works, City Engineer. Now I'll let you talk.
Thank you. At the last council meeting, there was some additional information that was requested for specifically this vehicle, and Jason Anderson put together the memo, and I'll ask him to come out and kind of give the explanation. While he's coming up too, I want to mention that the staff is working on a procedure for capital equipment replacement program, but that won't be ready till at least before next budget cycle. So that's something that we kind of look forward to for all of the equipment items throughout the city. We're working on a regular replacement program. Jason.
Thanks, Glenn. Thank you, Mayor and Council as well. As you mentioned, this was tabled at the last meeting, and the Council asked for a little more reasoning behind the replacement of this pickup. It's a 2006 3/4 ton crew cab truck with 62,000 miles on it, and I believe the Council wanted some backing for replacing a truck with only 63,000 miles on it. This truck does have an hour meter on it as well, so we pulled the hours off the truck. It has 6,000 hours on it, which is quite a bit for 62,000 miles on the truck. And the reason for that is our engineering and community planning pickups, so building inspections pickups and engineering technician pickups, see a lot of short trips. They see a lot of starts and stops. They drive around construction sites a lot. They do idle some to run computer software inside the vehicles when they need to. So the pickups do kind of have more of an abusive life than maybe the mileage would entail. So that's the purpose for staff proposing to replace this truck. I guess I would open it up for any questions that the council may have.
Jim?
I do, because 6,000 hours is a lot. I have work trucks, so I pulled my work trucks, which do the same thing. I have a work truck at 51,000 miles on it, has 1,500 hours on it. I guess as I look at this is what angers me, and I'm going to kind of be blunt about this. This truck sits and idles. It's not running. I don't know why this truck is all idling. To me, this is unacceptable. This is a waste of tax dollars. I talked to a mechanic. He says you could throw a new motor in that truck. Nothing else would be wore out in it because it has not been driven. You know, plain and simple. I don't understand why there would be 6,000 hours on a vehicle with 60,000 miles on it unless it's sitting and idle. Plain and simple.
Mr. Mayor. Jason, the correlation there is in the reference. Some fleet manager trade publications cite correlation 25 to 30 miles per 1 hour of idle time. So I calculated this out. It's 10.325 miles per hour, and that's just, again, like Councilmember Lozinski says, I think it's just we have a problem where we're idling too much. As I think about what we're doing in the Department of Engineering and building inspection, there's no reason to idle these things. None. I just don't get why we're idling so much, and so I'm not a big fan of it.
One thing I would add about that too is when you have a construction site and these guys have to move their trucks around the site because it has all their survey equipment, their lath, their supplies to do their job, the trucks do run a lot and travel very little distance. I mean, that's very common on our construction site. It doesn't necessarily mean that the truck is just sitting there running all day, but it does get moved around a lot.
Sure, I understand that.
And with very little distance covered.
Sure,
Yeah.
that takes 20 seconds to move it a little bit.
Just a statement, yeah.
And I think to kind of come at this at a maybe a little bit different tangent is that, you know, the truck is 12 years old, but again, it's 61,000 miles, 62,000 miles. So it should be in reasonable shape. And like Councilmember Lozinski said, worst case scenario, you put an engine in it, you know? And I mean, you can get a professionally remanufactured warranted engine for a lot less than the bid, you know, to replace the truck. And I also don't feel great about this. A truck that has $7,000 worth of residual trade-in value that doesn't make a lot of out-of-town trips, you know, I mean, with the work expectation of the truck as it's represented, it isn't a public safety critical use vehicle. It's probably more seasonal than a lot of the other departments. You know, I mean, I don't imagine they're doing a lot of survey work in the wintertime.
We do some survey work year-round, yeah.
But not the construction site
Right.
type work. So, I mean, I have a hard time supporting this, and I believe in keeping good vehicles up, but I have a hard time supporting this.
David?
If it's in order, would it be appropriate to make a motion to direct the engineering department to review the information we've presented and come up with some additional options, including possibly a redone engine in lieu of the overall purchase?
That would be appropriate. However, we do have really bids to act on, so I think
So first we'd have to dispose of those and then consider these options. Okay.
I guess the question I have, are you even having mechanical problems with it?
It's, what I would say is it's had a lot of, and it will continue to have a lot of standard maintenance for an engine that's had time on it. Belts, catalytic converter, those types of things, spark plugs, all the normal stuff that gets
That's
done,
normal wear and
transmission
tear.
changes, wear and tear stuff. And as you extend the life of these vehicles, you start getting more and more of that. So it's up to the council to decide how long we run them, how much maintenance and downtime we deal with when we have advantageous bid prices through government pricing. That's the conversation, and I want to make it clear that we're okay with whatever the council decides. We're here to do the work, not play with the toys. But ultimately, I think a greater discussion about total cost of ownership and yearly cost of ownership needs to be had with
Right.
maybe buying at our good prices and selling when they have value, and maybe it's more advantageous for us to do that. I think that's something that we should really look into long-term.
And I think
But
that,
I'll state, we'll do whatever we're directed to do.
and I think we appreciate that. And I want to speak as part of the equipment committee, is that part of the issue here is bigger. We should not have these discussions here. I really think and we've been directed as the equipment committee to approve whether the specs that are given would be adequate for if we proceed to purchase or replace a vehicle, not whether we think that it's a good move to do that. And I think we need to expand the role of the equipment committee to look at the appropriateness of it, and then the whether the spec meets the expectation or not. So I would really propose that we expand that function. We should not be doing this here.
And I would add also, if we're not liking the replacement of this truck, we also have a building inspection pickup that's a 2003 with over 100,000 miles and 5,000 hours that needs 2 quarts of oil every 400 miles. And it fouls spark plugs very frequently.
That's
commonly.
a better sales pitch. That's a better sales pitch.
But that one's also getting replaced with the purchase of the other pickup we approved 2 weeks ago, correct?
No.
They're
That
moving the
pickup,
vehicle down.
that pickup is
There-
being
so the
moved down to
2003
building
is going away.
maintenance. That's the 1993 truck will be replaced, the building maintenance truck. But the pickup I'm referring to is the pickup being used by our building official right now. That's not scheduled for replacement yet at this time. It's partially funded. We're hoping to put something together for next year to fully fund it.
And I think along, Craig, with what you said, I think, I was hoping that we wouldn't have to do a policy. I believe we need to have a policy on how these vehicles are run. I look at the Schwansman that stops at my house. He has computers in his truck. His truck idles for 1 minute and then automatically shuts off. They have it built into their vehicles. I understand you got to move them, but your new vehicles, you go to a stoplight now, they shut off and they start up when you leave. We don't need these vehicles running. And if it's going to take a policy to get that through, I believe that needs to be done. These vehicles, what they're idling, they cost gas, it costs the environment, wear and tear, like you said, which costs money. We need to instill, and we have good staff, and I don't know why it does this, but we need to instill into our staff, you stop at the store, you shut the vehicle off. Every time they leave that vehicle, it should be shut off. And I'll use my liability insurance, just told me, every time my guys get out of their vehicle, it needs to be shut off because there's a liability to have that vehicle running.
And not to get down in the weeds on this, but, for the ones that need to run like the survey equipment and that type of thing, there might be a possibility where, we engineer in some marine-type deep cycles with diodes that they charge one way and not the other, and just use that to run the equipment and let them trickle in so we can shut them off and have a battery back that's not going to cause the engine to not start. We might have to look at accessorizing, but again, I think that's a discussion that we need to drill into somewhere other than here. And so, I'll actually make a motion that we not approve the purchase of this, and I think we need to revisit.
I'll second it.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Jim, to not approve the purchase of the 2019 Dodge Ram pickup. I'll pause for a second, Kyle, until you get that restated motion and software, and I'll open up for any discussion then on that motion. So you have the restated motion in front of you. Is there any additional discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. We'll move then to agenda item number 10.
Thank you, Jason.
Agenda item number 10 is consideration of a proposal for a public archery range land adjacent to the Merit Center. With us today, Scott Vanderbillen, Community Services Director.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'd like to introduce Ty Brower, who'd like to do do a presentation on a public archery range. Ty's done a great job of going through the proper channels. He started with the Merit Center Board, came to Community Services, made a presentation to City Administrator Hanson. We'd like the council to consider the proposal, and if the logistics can be worked out, it's something that Community Services would be interested in partnering with Ty in terms of putting this together for the community. So with that, Ty Brower.
Thank you, Scott. Welcome, Ty.
Thank you, Council and Mr. Mayor. So I'm going to make the beginning of this story really short. I got a 5-year-old that took a love of archery, and this summer I'm a member of the Saratoga Archery Club down in Amoret. And as a 5-year-old, after supper, there's not a lot of time to go shoot archery down in Amoret. I got to drive down there, set up, we shoot, we come home, and it's after bedtime. He's cranky the next morning. The wife was not happy. So we'll leave it that, right? So I'm like, how can I make this to where it's easier for both myself, the community, and then also to get people into archery? I'm an avid archer. I go to South Dakota every year antelope hunting, and I started brainstorming, and I didn't know how to go about this process. So I actually reached out to Craig Schaefer. He's my representative for my part of town. He said to reach out to Jasmine DeSmet, part of the Merit Center, because after a little bit of brainstorming, we thought there'd be a good piece of property. So I put together this presentation. I actually visited multiple public archery ranges and private ranges that are associated with, like, gun clubs or their own private archery ranges. So Sharon, if you go to the next one. So this one right here was a Boy Scout project done up in St. Joseph. I kind of modeled it after this, but I didn't. You'll see that they've got a covered station there. I will not have a covered station. They have small little cement standing stations. I've actually got a sidewalk. And then you'll see how some of the targets go one direction, and then there's some other targets at a 90-degree angle. And then there's also a parking lot and picnic table. So kind of keep those pieces in mind as I go through this presentation. So I did go down to Wyndham. Now this is a private range. This was taken pictures last year when they just finished it. That's why there's no grass, it's all dirt. Now it's all grass, very finely taken care of. And I modeled my target about 95% after these targets. I did reach out to the Wyndham Archery Club. They gave me complete and total access to the blueprints. Go for it. Any help they need, they're there to help me with this. They said I could model our targets after this as well. So this is the front of the target. And if you'll notice, in the next few slides, this target will be included in this presentation. But you'll see there's a roof covering the target. That'll help with the longevity of these targets, keeping the sun off of them, the rain, the snow, the elements, and just better for general care. So this is the front of the target. The only difference that I'm going to tell you now, it'll be in the further presentation, is that instead of the 2x4s on the top and the bottom in the front, I'm proposing 2x6s because I'm going to have signage on there as well. This is the side of the target. Pretty basic. You can see the target sandwiched in between those boards, the roof at an angle. I got the blueprints coming up, and this is the side, and then the next slide will be the back side. I am presenting that if this were to be done, I would not have any of those targets facing towards the shooting line, just because there's too much distraction, and I think for the purpose of the archery range, the front-facing target should be facing the shooting line. Okay. Here's some signage. So this is actually from the Redwood Falls Archery Club, and this is also a private club, but field points only and archery range only. I know it's all common sense, but we need to put it out there. The reason there's field points out there is because field points is just a small point at the end of the tip, or at the end of the arrow. Broadheads are what have your blades on it. You shoot blades at these targets, they're going to tear them up. You're going to have a lot more costs, and then a lot more maintenance. So to kind of bring some of that, or alleviate some of the pain from that, that's why we're only doing field points only. This is the proposed property. So when you're looking at the picture, the top right of the picture would be up where the Merit Center building is. MMUA would be down at the bottom of the point. And then the new industrial project that was just finished by Midwest Contracting is off to the left of this picture. So what I did is, if you go to the next picture, please, I actually went out and I screenshotted my location with a rangefinder. And I figured out how wide this property is and how long this property is, so that way I can get a better idea of how to lay out this project. So you can see it's 100 yards at its max wide, and then beyond the road to the end of the field where it's mowed is at 133 yards. So now, here's my proposed idea. I got a parking lot in the grass. Really, I think if we just put up a few, kind of like out at the public properties where the DNR has, you know, like the log fencing, we can make something easy for the parking lot. There's a little blue star there. You'll see it's a welcome sign and a rules sign. The welcome sign we'll get into further down the presentation, but it's, you know, welcome everybody to the Marshall Public Archery Range. There's obviously rules for, you know, liability and everything. And then also there's going to be a sponsor sign, which we'll get into further in the presentation. That L, the solid yellow line, is going to be a sidewalk, which I did get a proposal for. It's going to be 4 foot wide, 4 inches deep, and then roughly about 100 yards long. I got 2 10-yard targets facing the east, 2 20-yard targets facing the east, and then a 30 through 100 facing the south. The reason for that being, if we have any intro to archery shooters, kids, or anybody that's just sighting in a new bow type situation, now when you're shooting at those shorter ranges, anybody shooting at the longer ranges doesn't have to wait. And then we have the opportunity to allow people more to shoot. And that's why I'm proposing it this way. I did go out to the Archery Trade Show Association website, and I went to their safety portion, and this is a screenshot from their webpage. So the top 2 is just a rough estimate as to how much land you should have beyond the target for their recommended safety layout. The bottom one is the one that I want to inform you all of. So my furthest target's going to be 100 yards. Beyond that, I need half the distance of the target, or of the longest target. So if I got 100 yards out there, I need 150 yards of total property. Well, as you can see from the road almost to the grass, we're at about 130 yards. Well, beyond that, where MMUA is well beyond all of the swamp area, the trees. They're about 300 to 400 yards. So there's plenty of safety land, I guess I would say, from where I'm presenting my shooting line to where the people are going to be shooting their targets at. So, and then some of the smaller details, 5 to 8 yards in between each station. So there's going to be a stand with a hook for the people to put up their bows, walk out to go retrieve their targets, and they're going to be about 5 to 8 yards apart. Bow hangers, there will be a picture here coming up in the slide. The cement sidewalk. The reason I did a full sidewalk instead of the small portions is that way there's a safer walking area from the parking lot to each target station. And instead, when people are standing in the grass and let's say it rains tonight and I go shoot tomorrow, well then after standing there for so long, you're going to wear out the grass and turn it into a mud pit. So let's keep it cleaner, I guess, with the sidewalk. And then place the signs previously posted, the archery range only, field tip only, and then, yeah, the field tip only range. So. Here's some signage. I did reach out to CE Signs and Designs and just had them throw up a mock estimate together and then as well mock signs. So these signs would be 6 inches by I think 14 is what they put together. And each target would have one of these signs. So when you're standing at the sidewalk, you know exactly how far you're shooting out in case somebody forgets their rangefinder or something like that. So here's just a rough 90 and 100 yards. Again, archery range only, field points only. Those two are pretty important. And then here's the welcome sign. This is a very basic, put-together welcome sign. Last time I met with Sharon, she had a great question, and it completely slipped me. But close and latch all gates. There won't be any gates. I'm not proposing any gates. It's just up there for showcase right now. And then here's a bow hanger. It's just a typical 4x4, 2 hooks on the side, and then a couple aluminum numbers. And we would put that at each station right in front of each target. So when you hang your bow up at the 30-yard range, you know you're going to shoot at the 30-yard target. So, yep. And then target suggestions. So these are the targets that were in the pictures. I did reach out to Morrell. That price on that target is cheaper than what dealers can buy. Because it's a brand new archery range, they are giving us a better deal than what Morrell dealers can literally buy them for. They go, this is confidential, but I'm proposing it to you, so I'm going to show you what it costs. So I want to let you know. I'm going to be honest with you. So, so front and back, 36 inches by 15 by 45, so it's a large target. And then a target stand, I went through, and that's everything put together. Each target's going to cost roughly about $65, and then the bowl holders are $12 a piece for each shooting station. And then picnic tables, I just pulled a picture off Menards, and they're at $98. So if we did 3 picnic tables, so someone's got somewhere to lay their bow cases or coats or whatnot, there's something instead of just on the ground. And then project costs. So at 12 targets, because they're going to have 2 10s, 2 20s, and then 30 through 100, we're at 12 targets. Here's pricing for everything. $1,900 for the targets. The target stands, that's what's surrounding the target itself, so we're at $780. The bowl holders, the sidewalk is at $4,700. Signage, $721, which if they were to do a sponsorship, which I'll get to in about a couple minutes, that may actually bring down the cost. And then picnic tables. So the whole project, the way I'm proposing it right now, we're at $8,500. Now, supporting organizations. I don't know if you received any of the letters of support, but the Buffalo Ridge Gobblers, I will come up front. I am the chapter president of the National Wild Turkey Federation chapter here in town. I did not do any of the letter. I came to my chapter and I said, if you guys are in support of this, I would like a letter of support. But I am presenting this on my own. So just to be up front, this is not the Turkey Federation doing it. Lyon County Pheasants Forever is on board. Prairie Highlands QDMA is on board. The Boy Scouts, Minnesota State Archery Association, the chapter president lives in Milroy, Minnesota. They are on board. Action Manufacturing, Ziegler Cat. I did get verbals from Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. Their organization would not allow a letterhead to be used. Why, they don't know, but the chapter did verbally commit or support. Some other verbal supports, Barrels and Arrows, Friends of the NRA, Saratoga Archery as well. I reached out to them. I proposed this. The reason they were on board is because if somebody doesn't want to drive Tamarack like I didn't with my children, now they have somewhere closer to shoot. And then when they're into shooting and they want to keep going from the fall to winter, now that'll bring more members down to them. So they are completely on board for this, as well as they could do intro to archery up here if they needed to. And then funding. So I drew up a sponsorship form, pretty basic, explains, shoot, did you guys get it printed off? Here it is right here. Pretty basic. Any member, organization, company wants to do this. For $500, you get a 12-inch by 12-inch logo at the welcome sign. For $250, there's an 8-inch by 8-inch logo, or for $100, you just get your name listed on the board. So as I'm talking to organizations and I've been doing all these meetings, I've kind of been talking to people, you know, what kind of support do we have here in town? Verbally, I've had anywhere from $2,000 to $2,500 already raised for this project. Now, when I did meet last with Sharon and Scott, I've met with Glenn. They said they may even have access to some community access grants. So, you know, there's that funding. Also, I just lost my train of thought. I was going through. Oh, could you go back one page? Sorry. Raffles. I talked to Barrels and Arrows. They just been granted an archery shop license through a major manufacturer. They would give us a bow at cost to raffle off to put towards this project, as well as any other fundraisers, and then again, like I had mentioned, grants. So there is a list right here, and I can hand this to you of all the other. This is the list right here of all city public archery ranges that are free to the public. I know the websites are long, you can't click on them, but I at least wrote down what city names are on here. The closest public range that's in town is Hutchinson, Minnesota, along the river next to the park, by the running path. So that question was brought up. What about liability? This is far enough away from the public versus everything else that I've seen. I mean, this is very safe, the way I've put this together. Like I said, the Hutchinson one, there's people running right behind you, the river's right in front of you, and the park is right to the left of you. So that's my presentation. If anybody has any questions, feel free to fire away.
Thank you, Ty. Questions? Or Sharon, do you have anything to add at this point?
I just want to thank Ty. I know he's done a tremendous amount of communication with different staff people, and appreciate him making the initial contact to Councilman Schaefer and then bringing it forward to staff. So one thing we didn't mention via the individual talks is just if the city would go forward and working with Scott Vandermill, our community services director, I think there would need to be some rezoning, or some of that may have to come into play. I don't think it would be an issue, but it would be an additional process that would have to be gone through. So I just want to be upfront with you. That wasn't relayed earlier.
Oh, sure, okay.
And I think also, just one other thing too, for complete transparency, is that the actual piece of property that Ty's proposing, at the Merit Board meeting, we realized that that particular site, and it's a pretty loose agreement, but there's a rental or a lease option on that we have with Municipal Utilities Association. Talking to Cody there, I mean, it's not a problem. It's very workable, but just an FYI that, you know, there's, the good news at Merit is we're getting enough activity where we're actually starting to have some conflict that we have to work through, which is a good problem to have. But it just, you know, in case you hear something about that, you know, well, somebody's renting that or leasing that piece of property, we're just gonna rearrange how things get used. He uses it once a year, and it's not a disruptive or destructive use. So a lot of options out there, and he seems very supportive of this also. So.
Yep. And one thing I'd like to mention is through this, I didn't mention it in the presentation here, but also through all my discussions, I've gained a lot of verbal commitments for volunteer time to put these targets together, to get these put in. So there wouldn't be anything on the city's portion. The only thing that we really just thought of when I had met with Glenn was the ground isn't probably the most level. There just needs to be a little work done. So I know you mentioned maybe if we were to just take a day out there with like the city grader, level it off, that's all it really would take. There's just a small elevation change, but it's nothing real serious. So, and like I said, all the volunteer time has been committed already. So,
Glenn, do you have any comments?
Yes, I do. Couple of things. Is it intended to be a public facility, a private facility, operated and managed by the Merit Center or Community Services?
So my plan, or the grand scheme, is I'm bringing this forward to the city, putting this together as a public range, and then handing it over to Community Services. Rob Yant has been in a lot of these meetings, and a lot of questions have been brought up. Well, how does this coincide with the Merit Center? You know, the Merit Center's safety and instruction, everything else. Well, this is a great position for us to use, or a facility where we can introduce archery at a safe location, have instructors that are teaching the youth and the adults, you know, safe shooting, you know, because with the talks of even having a rifle range out there, that kind of coincides with each other. So Rob has been real supportive. I thought I was hoping he would have been here, but you know, that was kind of the direction that we were going with that as well. So.
Okay, and then we will work with the organization to develop the wording for the change of zoning. We don't have it as an approved or conditional use in the industrial zone, but that's just a process. So if it's being supported, we'll put together that recommendation for change of or addition to the zoning. Right now, it's only permitted, it's kind of strange, in the B3 area, general business, and most of the time, that's because it's going to be an indoor facility, but it is always by conditional use. So I think those are the conditions. What he presented to us was just really exactly what we wanted to see.
Mr. Brower, I thank you for your presentation. I thought it was outstanding. I, too, am an archer, and I, too, had that same experience with my kids going down to Saratoga, and it lasted 1 year, and I was done.
Yep.
I see this as a very positive thing. I don't know, Mr. Mayor, several years ago when Schwann's had a speaker series, there was a guy who came and was talking about walking paths, and he talked about, you know, a lot of cities will build things in hopes that it will draw people in. He said that's the wrong way to approach it. And he's got internationally known acclaim. He says if you build it for your citizens, the citizens will enjoy it so much that people come in and say, what's there to do in Marshall? Well, let's go to the archery range. Mm-hmm. And then it starts drawing more and more people in. So I think this is wonderful. And if we build it and we see in the summer, around Sounds of Summertime, maybe Community Services is going to arrange a statewide archery competition out there, and then we've got more heads and beds on hotels. And I think it just is a great thing. Plus, when the kids say, there's nothing to do. Really? Let me take you out and show you something to
Yep.
do. So I think it's a fantastic thing. Also, as far as grants, I remember a few years ago at the state fair, I went and the DNR has money lying around like crazy that nobody ever uses for archery.
Except for this year. I reached out to them.
There you go.
They had an archery range grant
Yeah.
for 2018. I reached out to the highest level I could go. For
Too
some
little, too
reason,
late.
2019 they don't have it, but maybe in 2020 or 2018 they don't. Maybe 2019, but they don't know. You
Well,
know,
you
and
keep
of course
asking
I'm a
for
year
it,
late.
but-
You know, it's $1
Yep.
short or whatever. So
Yeah. But I think it's a great idea. I wholeheartedly support this.
Thank you.
And it's not that much money.
thank you.
Ty, I'm supportive of this also, and thank you for the planning that you
Yeah.
put into this. The one thing that I'm sure you've thought about the detail on this, on the sponsorship form, is who the recipient of the, who like the fiscal agent would be, because that's not identified on.
Yeah, so that was one of the details. I didn't know how that would work, essentially handing it over to like the community services department. You know, when I did discuss this with our chapter, whether they write a check to like the Buffalo Ridge NWTF and then the memo, you know, for the archery range, and then we take that money and cut a check to the city, you know, if we do that, or do they just write a check straight to community services? I guess that would be up to.
And those are details that you can work out, and our finance director would be
Yep.
involved in that.
And I'd be glad to help
Scott.
that out, yep. So,
Do you have another point?
I guess the question I have, and this sounds like a wonderful idea, and this kind of goes to you, Scott. When this gets turned over to community services, is it going to remain open? Because you say take your kids out there. There isn't going to be a fence built around it, and I like that idea. That's not fenced in. A lot of the, once it's built, how do we keep supporting it to maintain it without putting a fence around it and charging people?
great question. So, through discussions of all the local organizations that you had seen up on the PowerPoint, as well as working with like Barrels and Arrows and all that, there was a general discussion of, if we were to meet every 2 years, rotate a bunch of the targets, because obviously the 20s and the 30s are going to get shot a lot, and the 100's not going to get barely shot at all. So we rotate those about every year, 2 years. Once those are all wore out, then we can work with Barrels and Arrows. Again, they said they would give us a bow at cost, do a raffle to help pay for new targets every other year. These organizations, like through the NWTF, we get money through the state chapter fund. So we could request money that way for our local organization to use for the public archery range, or for our local events. So in discussion with all of those organizations, they're all on board to help as future as well.
So this should stay as a self-sufficient, free option for
Yep,
citizens.
yep. And if we put a donation box, I thought about that too, and somebody throw a couple bucks in there, but who knows if somebody takes a crowbar and
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
40 bucks,
yeah.
and now the range is out $40, and we got a broken box, and now you got to replace that as well. So,
toe strap and a
right? I mean,
hitch, and all of a sudden it's a tow toy.
exactly. So,
I want to say in support of what Ty's doing here too, I've shot both the Hutch range and the Glencoe range. Glencoe has one too that's just right north of 212, kind of between the two exits, and they're absolutely drive up, walk on. There's, you just, it's very obvious. You shoot this way, you don't shoot that way, and very accessible, and they get pretty well used. And I like the idea, again, relating back to like Sounds of Summer, anything like that. If this works, I don't have to squint to see Saratoga and other organizations sponsoring a 3D shoot. You look at what we have out at the Merit Center. I think as we do the rezoning, we have to be cautious and allow for temporary placement of targets, so that if you do a 3D shoot, it's not the same every time, and you can do a walkthrough. There's a plenty of path there. If you schedule the weekend, there's no other training. Archery is a very safe way to do target skills, and it's just, and it fits youth very well.
yep. And the intro to archery right now is at the middle school grounds, if I'm not mistaken. So that would pull that out of, the middle of the residential area. And then talking to the Minnesota State Archery Association president, they could bring some of those state shoots to Marshall. They set up the targets at 30 yards. We have the one at 30, but then we could put them all in front of the 40 to 100. They could do their shoot, have it at the sidewalk. Everything would already be laid out for them. So they were completely on board for this as well.
Any other comments, John?
Just, and maybe Scott, you could address a little bit of that, but in speaking with one of the groups that provided a letter of support, mentioned the literally thousands of kids that they've helped train or teach archery. Do we have any figures on that of how many kids really in the area are taking up archery?
We currently offer summer programming, and our vision would be is if we can put this together, we would offer spring and fall, and then operate some adult programming as well. So it's hard to get a gauge of the numbers that we could provide, but I would say that our summer programming, all of our sessions the last 2 summers have been filled. I mean, we could offer 60 slots at a time, and they would go like that.
Okay.
So.
That's very good.
It certainly appears that there's good support from the council to move to the next step on implementation. I would entertain that as well.
I would make the motion that we direct the staff to work with Ty on moving this forward.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Steve. Discussion?
I just think it's a great idea. I think this is, and I appreciate, this is what I like about this city. We have people coming, you have an idea, you did all the right things. I applaud you.
Thank you. Thank you.
No other discussion. We'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Thank you, Ty.
Thank you.
And thank you, Scott. Move then to agenda item number 11. Agenda item number 11, consider the approval of the resolution authorizing the transfer of funds from Fund 494 to the City Hall Building Fund 494. Carla Drown is our Finance Director. Carla?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So the council has been very supportive in the City Hall renovation. So staff now have started looking at ways to fund this without bonding. And earlier this year, the council closed some debt service funds into Fund 495, freeing up money. And rather than putting those funds towards our debt services, other bonds, which are low interest, we could now utilize some of those funds and put them into a construction fund for City Hall, so which would not have to bond so early in the project at high interest rates. So utilizing these funds, still continuing to pay our other bonds at low interest rates. And so that staff is coming forward tonight asking to move these funds from our 495 revolving fund, public improvement revolving fund, to 494, our City Hall renovation project fund.
Okay, thank you, Carla. Thank you for the recommendation. Just questions?
I've visited with Carla on and off about this, and I agree with this. Because like I said before, it makes no sense to pay off notes that we're paying 1.5%, 2% on, to reborrow money at 4%. Sure, it says we lower our debt, but at the end of the day, we pay more in interest. I think in the long run, I know in the long run, this will save the taxpayers. I think this is a smart move for the city to do. Paying for your bills instead of borrowing the money is always better.
Was that a motion?
That is a motion.
Motion by Jim, seconded by David. Discussion? Thank you, Carla. We will move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 12. Agenda item number 12. Agenda item says to call for a public hearing regarding the request for a property tax abatement for the property owned by SBM Hospitality LLC. As City Administrator Hanson, announced at the beginning of the meeting, this is not an action item. This is an information item, and the reason for that is that the policy is really still under the process of being developed, so it would be premature to have a hearing on a proposal when the policy isn't in place. But with us tonight is Tara Onken. Unless, Sharon, do you want to say anything to start with?
Maybe Tara will bring this up as well. We did bring this towards or through the EDA board to get their recommendation. I think Tara included that in the packet, I believe the memo. And that kind of explained their wishes, and we have since had some additional follow-up questions from representatives of the EDA board. That promulgated some of our discussion today about doing some further work on this. And then I know specific to the last meeting where there's a presentation by a hotel developer, I think we want to do some additional discussions with him as well on timing and his availability and what he's looking at as in terms of the schedule. The one final thing I'll point out is that any policy, we're going to closely follow the Minnesota statutes on the tax abatement, and typically in our resolutions or the policy, a lot of that verbiage that's in that Minnesota statutes is kind of recited back in the policy. And so some of the questions I actually think today could have been answered through the statutes, but we'll continue that discussion. So I just wanted to make that comment, and I'm sure Tara was going to allude to some of that or expound on it further.
So Mayor, I have one question on this. This is not being truly transparent to our public. I think that because it was in the agenda to call for a public hearing, so a lot of the people who are interested in this didn't come because they didn't think they could make an opinion or gain the information. I think it would be good to wait for this for 2 weeks so the folks who are all interested in this can be here. I don't want us as a council being accused of, well, you guys switched and baited us. I have issues when we're doing tax abatement with doing that. The agenda said to call for a public hearing, which at that point is a very simple thing. You call for a public hearing, folks come in 2 weeks, you give out the information. I think it would be good if this waited for 2 weeks and we put into the agenda that we're doing an informational spread on this project so those interested parties are aware of that and they can be here.
I'm fine with that. I'm not fine with the reference that it was switch.
Well, I apologize, but
because there was no intention of that.
Yeah. And
Right.
But it's, you know, so the public, so it's out there and we're being transparent about what we are doing.
I think one thing to keep in mind, or just so everybody understands, is that the abatement policy itself, and that is what the overall broad policy, that's what the EDA discussed and made the recommendation to council on to consider expanding that to industry-wide, and that was itself what the EDA discussed. They did not discuss project-specific as far as Shilas, so there's kind of two different things going on here on the same topic, but yet two different pieces of it.
And if we're doing industry-wise, I think it's good then to let those folks know so they can be part of this discussion.
And I think that's what the informational piece is here, is to
Yeah.
further explain
It
that
is,
so we can put that out. So I really think that this is being more transparent because we're slowing it down and getting it focused.
You are, but I think we should give an opportunity to those folks to be at the council.
Well, and I think this will do that. I mean,
Yeah.
we're not speeding it up, we're slowing it down. Slowing it down gives people a chance to get on.
And Jim, to your point too, and I agree with you, this is a continuing discussion. It's not, there may be discussion this evening as information.
And that's fine. I don't want folks to come up and say, well, this was what was on the agenda, now we're not there. And because I don't think that's the right way to do this. We need to have on the agenda what it is.
And Jim, I think that's a fair evaluation if we're speeding up, but we're slowing down. So I think we're allowing things to pick up. So I think you're right.
Well, just
I
so
think
we're aware as
actually
a
helping.
council that this discussion may happen all over again in 2
Right.
weeks. You know, maybe I'm trying to save time too, so we don't do it twice.
I think from my perspective, I wanted to get your guys' take on how the draft is, because at the last council meeting, you instructed staff to prepare a draft. So we have the draft that was uploaded as of Friday, it's a working, living, breathing document, made a few more tweaks and changes based upon other, past practices in other communities, based upon comments or feedback from EDA board members, now bringing another, working draft to you guys for further review and discussion. So that's the purposes of the meeting tonight, and to voice any concerns, questions, discussion. I'm looking for feedback from you guys as to the direction which you'd like me to go.
David?
On that very point, Tara, this is a very small matter, but at the technical level, on page 2, there's a discussion, just had it here, about the making clear correctly that this would be an abatement specifically and only for city property taxes. And then you list the entities whose taxing authority is not affected. Now, where is it? Middle of the page. The city is solely responsible, etc. and you list county, township, state, or school district property taxes, I think we need to add special district, because we all pay, as homeowners, a little portion each year through our property tax to the Southwest Regional Development Commission. What, about 5 more years to run on that, Bob? To make up the Prairie Expo.
Yeah, that's actually through the county.
But it's listed separately on our tax statement.
Yeah, but I think that's just for the generals.
All right.
We'll follow up.
Let's add that. I mean, I would recommend we add, just so it's totally clear, special district to that list. Thank you.
The other thing to make clear, and this relates to the EDA recommendation also, and I think one of the changes that you made was to pull out the specific example that was provided by the developer that was here last time, is that the policy is a general policy, and then each project that is requesting, if they would request an abatement, needs to come forward and will be judged on its own merit, and they may or may not have the same benefits in terms of investment in the community or jobs created or whatever, and that may affect the structure of the abatement, including limits of time. So you know, I think that's one consideration.
I think it's good to have a policy in place if that's the route that the city wants to go, because then if, you know, my office or whoever's office gets inquiries, then we can say, okay, well, here's a general guideline. You know, if this is something you want to proceed with, here's the application, here's the documentation that council will look at, and then they'll look at your project on a case-by-case basis. I will email out to council an updated draft that's kind of been going, so we can keep the conversation going. I think we're heading in the right direction. I also think it would be impossible to write something that covers every single scenario that we can think of, but I think what we're working towards is a document that's covering as much as possible without pigeonholing us into something. So
I think Sharon's point also is that the policy really follows state statute, and then the public hearing process is the time then to take into account the individuality of the various projects. John?
Yeah, I just, a number of things when this was discussed at EDA, and kind of go along with it, reality a little bit to Jim's remarks. I don't think we're ready for a public hearing on the hotel, and that's probably one of the reasons why we can do this as an informational item, because I don't think we're ready because we don't have this policy in effect. But really the intent and the discussions at the EDA was this is not just limited to hotels, it could be any business. One of the things, if it's at all possible, I'd like to see worked into here is that at some point they're showing, a business has to show a need in the community. And a little bit in connection with, if you look at the hotel, whether you like it or not, or agree with it or not, there is a hotel study that goes along with it. If there's a business that comes in looking for tax abatement, and we already have 3, 4, 5 businesses in that field right now, and it's questionable whether we need another one, that's maybe an area where the council would say, well, probably not appropriate. So I think part of the input I'd like to see that's brought to whichever entities are looking at these is that they show the need in the community for that particular portion or speciality of that business. So, and really limited to business. I don't think this is really, from an industrial end, because you can't have TIF and you can't have abatement at the same time. So likelihood that if you're in a TIF area that it may be more likely a TIF would be financially advantageous to you than an abatement. But that may be a difference too, but that understanding as well, which is part of the regulations, that you can't double dip in the two. You have to have them separate. So.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really appreciate EDA's proposal and support to take this out and try to make it viable that we let the rest of our industry and commercial community in on this. I think that when we look at either new industry or existing commercial industry and business that want to expand, if it's an enhancement to what the product they deliver, additional production, additional commerce, and hopefully job expansion, I mean, why wouldn't we support that growth? And looking at it, it's building. The city doesn't put, the taxpayers of the city doesn't put a dime into this. Everything that happens is a growth, and it's a paced growth that says that we recognize it and we want to encourage it. It's really not a big chip that we're giving them, but it's usually enough to hopefully to get something off the block and let it roll. And I really commend the EDA, and I fully support what they put forward. It's great. I've had some phone calls from commercial owners that are interested in this, and they're existing, and they're good businesses, and they want to grow. And I think if we can show them that Marshall appreciates it and supports it, I think it's good for the entire community, and I really applaud you guys for moving forward on this. I think this is great. I hope we can get this put together and get it on the ground.
Maybe just one additional comment in there. I think this is something that, although has been out there, it certainly hasn't been used in Marshall fast. And the fact that we now are looking at it, we've done it with the housing, put a short period of time on that, but we're looking at just really adding tools to our toolbox that we can do and provide incentives to businesses, existing and new, to come in and do some growth. So, I like it. I'll be honest, I wasn't necessarily in favor of the housing one in the beginning, but as we went through that process and looked to see where it is, and the fact that, yeah, it's not really a cost to the city at first, and this is the same thing. We can look at how can we approach that, and if there isn't a lot of investment by the city, that we can bring in a business and do at least a partial abatement of some of the taxes. So.
Any other input? Yes, sir.
I just want to add a little bit on the agenda, and I don't want to beat it, but just to be fully transparent, agendas are subject to change, and typically public agendas, whether it be the city or the county, typically put a statement on their agenda which states that, and I know the county has that at the bottom of their agendas. That's something we could put in there. It doesn't make people feel better when they come here and we don't take action on it, but it is something that should be clear. And secondly, these are courtesy documents. There's no requirement under the open meeting law for agendas. Obviously, we do them for formality and process and efficiency and to get through some of the action items. So they're necessary, but they are really technically a courtesy document for the public. And then the third thing, which has been alluded to, the public hearing process of the abatement means that we would do an official publication separate from the agenda. And there's specific timelines that would be presented per statute in that as well. And then one of the other key partners in this, it's not mentioned legally, is our newspaper has done a pretty fantastic job communicating on this. That I think some of the feedback that councilmen have gotten, or Tara or I, has been because there was some communication put out by the newspaper. So hopefully, even though we're not perfect at it, with the different pillars of communication, that it is eventually going to get out to them. So I just wanted to kind of be clear about the agenda. It's not done on purpose, but it does happen from time to time.
Any other input?
The last thing is like you, Craig, I do support abatement, but I want to see numbers. I want to see how is it going to benefit us, to any business, if we give out the abatement. And if it brings in business, brings in sales tax, increases other taxes, it's good. I want to offset what we abate to what good do we do to the city. And I know you and I had this conversation. Yes, it makes you work harder, Tara, and I know you will, because you are a hard worker. And that's what I'm looking for. What is it going to benefit the city? Because at the end of the day, if we give this abatement, yes, I want to see the city benefit more than what we give. And
John's point too.
Yeah, so it's, well, I just want to make the point
Great.
too.
Very good.
One thing I think to note, to keep in mind as we move forward, two things. One is, am I hearing it, or do we need a motion if this draft is updated to reflect citywide? So I'm just clear on that, so I can, bring an updated draft at the next meeting. And then the other question that I would have for council, or more so a comment, I guess, is that when a specific abatement proposal or request is brought forth, there would be an abatement agreement that's specific to each parcel. So I think some of that benefit, like that Jim was just talking about, would be demonstrated. So if it's, I'll use the hotel for example, we have those numbers. If it's, a different type of business, we would have different numbers surrounding that business or entity. So I think you're exactly right, and part of the application, some of the documents that are in the proposed draft of what they need to include touches on that point, that we want to see the impact or the benefit that it would have on the community.
I think your second question, the answer in my mind is yes. The first question is, we're not going to do a motion tonight because this is an information item. We would expect that the draft policy that's in place now will be refined and then brought back at the next meeting.
Perfect.
Everybody okay? Yep. Okay, thank you, Terry.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
We'll move on to agenda item number 13. Agenda item number 13 is to consider the introduction of the ordinance to rezone the area shown in the survey as R1 single-family residence to I2 industrial district. So, Glenn, will you start with this?
No, I think Ilya will.
Ilya?
I don't know what happened.
Please stand by.
Talking that long.
Your television.
Welcome, Ilya.
Thank you, Mayor Council. So this is, can you put the map?
I don't know, Kyle. I hope we don't put any money towards the equipment in this room. If they ask for it, denied.
Is that a motion? Oh, wait, she can't make
They want to read.
So the action.
Sorry.
Okay, I think we actually deal without some of the detail. The action is introduction on this item. Ilya, I'll let you briefly explain.
Right, this is a request by Housing Redevelopment Authority, which owns the land in question that they're requesting to rezone it from R1 single family to I2 general industrial district. This property is in the process of being sold to Chuck Hess, and he owns the adjacent property and wants to, when he buys it, he wants to use it for storage, open storage, and that is only allowed in industrial district. That's why this request is in front of you. This area is right adjacent to the industrial district, so the staff doesn't see the problem with rezoning it to industrial.
Any questions on this? That is there a motion to introduce?
I so move.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by John. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Thank you. Agenda item number 14. Agenda item number 14 is the statement of annual performance evaluation for City Administrator Hanson. The council did meet in special session earlier this evening, reviewed that. And I prepared a summary of that discussion, and there is one available for the media, and I'll read this into the record. This is the 12-month evaluation for City Administrator Sharon Hanson, who has been employed with the city for just over 12 months. I would also add there was a prior 6-month evaluation also, and then after this point, there'll be annual evaluations for the remainder of her employment. So the summary of her evaluation is as follows. The city Marshall City Council mayors and mayor each individually completed an annual evaluation of the Marshall City Administrator. The evaluation covered the major components of the city administrator's job description, including job knowledge and professional skills, relations with members of the city council, policy execution, strategic vision, fiscal management, intergovernmental relations, reporting and communication, and citizen and community relations, staffing, and supervision. Each component was evaluated numerically with a low of 1 and a high of 5. The overall evaluation score, compiling all of the components from all of the city council members, averages 3.95, which is indicative of high-level performance, which often exceeds the challenging performance expectations for the position. So thank you, Sharon. Unless there's other comments from the city council, who all participated in this, I would entertain a motion accepting the performance evaluation.
So moved. Second.
Motion by David, seconded by Steve. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes, and then the second action, per our personnel and wage policy, a city administrator is eligible for a step increase on the wage scale from step 4 to step 5.
I so move.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Jim. Discussion. If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. With the formal part out of the way, let me just add, Sharon, we appreciate your service to the city. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
Thanks.
Okay, then we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item number 15. Agenda item number 15 is to consider a letter of support for United Community Action, the Early Head Start. Sharon, you.
Mr. Mayor and Councilmen, the United Community Action Partnership has come forward to ask for a letter of support. They have also approached the county and other entities that may help them with securing some funds. And I know that Councilman D. Kramer has had some early insight with this with his relationship on the UCAP board. So I will ask him to comment on this particular project as well.
John?
Yeah, really what's going on here is UCAP has an opportunity to submit a grant request. These don't come around very often, but they've had the ability to request opening up the Head Start program for an additional 72 students to add to the counties that are already served. It's kind of a lengthy list. We've got Cottonwood, Lyon, Jackson, Lincoln, Redwood, Candy, Ojai, Meeker, McLeod, and Renville counties. So there's quite an area of coverage. City itself is funded for 85 kids within the city limits, or within the city of Marshall, and they're seeking to open that up to a larger group because typically this fills up very fast, and there is a need out there for additional students coming into Head Start. So they're trying to get bumped up for another 72 openings, and they're looking for support from communities, counties, and other organizations. This is the reason for the request.
David?
Pardon if I missed this, either written or orally, but who are they seeking the approval and the funding from?
Now, this is a federal
grant,
so this has to come through the federal Head Start.
Okay, which is probably housed in Department of Education, maybe HHS?
That's a good question.
One of those-
I
one of those
don't know
two
if I can
is,
answer that. I'm not sure if
okay.
it's actually is.
But they're seeking the funding directly from the feds.
Yes.
Thank you.
This is a federal program, and I would say a very highly regulated federal program, so there's a lot of hoops to jump through, and as much support as they can show, the better.
I move approval of the letter of support.
Second that.
Motion by Craig, you're going to second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by John. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes, 1 vote, 1 abstention. Agenda item number 16 is Commission Board Liaison Reports. Actually, mine have not met since we last met. Craig?
None, Mr. Mayor.
And Steve?
EDA met, and we've talked a lot about what the majority of our discussion was on the Shailesh Patel request and how the EDA can get behind that, and obviously it generated a lot of discussion and opening it up to the industry-wide and not just specifically hotels. And so we had a lot of spirited discussion, and you had before you the results. So.
Very good. Thanks, Steve. John?
Well, Steve just covered the EDA, so MMU did attend that meeting. Couple of things in there. The MMU is just about complete with their budget. They should be wrapping this up. They'll wrap it up in the December meeting. A couple of things of interest. The water fluoridation quality award from the CDC was granted to this MMU for 2017. A little bit behind, but comes through. One of the other things that MMU needs to be recognized for is their participation in the Light Up the Night with Prairie Home Hospice. They've put in about a little over 2,000 feet of conduit to run wire in through Independence Park. And also a little bit of rewiring on the street lights down Main, so when it comes time for the nighttime parade, which hopefully everybody's going to be able to attend, they'll be able to turn off the street lights and have the street dark to see all the floats lit up. And then finally, one other fairly large-scale bit of news, MRES, which is the provider for power for the city of Marshall, the organization that MMU belongs to, has announced that they are considering in conjunction with ADM, of placing a 49 megawatt peaking plant, cogeneration natural gas plant in the area near the 7th Street substation. Yet to be determined exactly where, but they're looking at that with the intent, although not definite, but with the intent to come online by 2022. So that is a very major step. If recall some of the discussion in the past, this provides an opportunity for ADM to be using some of the heat generated off of that, and as well as the power. So they've been in discussions for some time and have now come forward. This would be a peaking plant. It would not, which means that it only operate when needed. It would not be a continuous running plant, but just handling the peaks that occur and, like say, a summer time frame or whatever. But a 49 megawatt unit is a fairly sizable investment in this community. So.
And I think, John, we need to emphasize this is a major development, a major investment. It would be similar to a plant in just over the line into South Dakota, the Deer Creek plant. So a very large plant. So it represents, not only the good work at MRES, but really the partnership, the cooperation with the city and with ADM.
Just a question, John, would this mean the retirement of the peaking generator on the MMU grounds? It's been there since 1969?
No, would not mean the retirement of that. That is still actually, I want to say, looking at the budgets, City of Marshall gets somewhere, I want to say, in the vicinity of about 400,000 off that plant just as it sits there. Just that it has the capability because they sell the capacity, they don't necessarily sell the power off.
Well, they typically don't fire it up except for the annual testing.
Not all.
But it's sort of like, pardon the analogy, Dennis, having an attorney on retainer.
That's about right.
Nice work.
That's always a good thing.
Nice work if you can get it. Thank you.
Thank you, John. David?
The CVB met last Wednesday. I was not able to attend. That's it.
And Jim?
Might have not met.
We'll move then to council member individual items, agenda item number 17. Greg, let's start with you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Really, the only thing that I have is, obviously we all know that there was a very serious fire at Southwest Coaches today, and and I'm going to miss people or miss organizations on this, but our Marshall Fire Department and all of the mutual aid departments, I believe, short of maybe Taunton, because I don't think I saw Taunton there, every fire department in Lyon County was there. And they were there. I mean, there was a lot of fire personnel, a lot of fire equipment on site, a lot of hard work. There was industry cooperation. There were telelifts and a grappling backhoe that were brought in. I mean, the community really pulled together. There were donations of food and beverage that was organized by one of the firefighters and Councilman-elect Labatt. The North Ambulance and Lyon County Emergency Services, just a ton of people pulling together. And then the community, and I won't name names because that's between Southwest Coaches and the people that are stepping forward to offer them temporary, at least, solutions to fit their needs. Just an awful lot of good community outreach. It makes you feel really good about being part of a community like Marshall and Lyon County and the entire area. But the amount of effort that was put in, and I'll tell you, when you look at the amount of money that we invest in fire equipment and fire training and our fire personnel, if you watched any of that today, you realize that we got every penny we paid for back in spades, and the mutual aid community amongst the fire and emergency, basically our emergency response or emergency management people, first responders, is absolutely amazing, and the strength of community and the force multiplier that we get out of those affiliations is absolutely invaluable. And I just want my hats off to every individual that was involved in that today, down to people stepping forward and offering solutions and assistance to the highs and Southwest Coaches and supporting our fire personnel. It just makes me proud to be part of the community.
Thank you, Craig.
Yep, and I reflect that as well. The one thing one additional thing that I have is off that topic, but I had sent a thing to Sharon that my wife had sent me on little, what are they, Sharon, those hangers that I showed you that had the banners. So my wife came across this, and since I'm a Navy veteran, and this is right around Veterans Day, some cities have banners that have veterans' names, either those who have served, who have been killed in action, missing in action, served, and I don't know whether they sponsor them, or the VFW sponsors them, or the American Legion sponsors them, or the city sponsors them. But I just thought, what a great thing during the month of November for our veterans, to put the banners of those city members who have served proudly in any of our armed forces. And with a fire department thing like this, if we've ever, hopefully we never have it happen, right, but for retired firefighters or police officers or those who may unfortunately be killed in the line of duty, I think that's just a great way to honor. So at some point in time, I think we need to look at putting that up. Just a wonderful thing to honor our citizens, because like Craig said, when you have an event like this where nobody had to ask. It just happened. It was spontaneous, and it's like organized chaos. Things just come together, and it's amazing. And I'm just so thankful to live in this city. It's just wonderful. So.
Very good. Thank you, Steve. Jim?
A couple of things. I want to go with what Craig said. It's, he said coming together. The other thing I want to point out is people don't realize who work inside how cold it is for those firemen. As somebody who's worked outside, not around water, not fighting fires, but how cold it was for them and just the energy it took for them to get up and do that when it's 9 degrees outside and squirt water. It is a tremendous fire department people that do that. On a brighter note, and John brought this up, but Friday night, Light Up the Night starts. I like Christmas lights. I think as a community, we need to get out and support that. Minnesota does host the largest free light display. I'd like to see the second largest free one in Marshall. So let's get out and support that. So, David?
Nothing tonight.
John?
Well, all the comments about the city and everybody proud to be here. Bring up one thing a little bit different, kind of going back on Craig's comment on the PIT. I was actually surprised that PIT doesn't review the equipment for the need ahead of time. I would agree with your comments and ask, is there something that we need to do as a council to make that change for PIT to actually look at the equipment and have those discussions within the committees where you get down maybe a little closer, maybe actually go out and see the equipment or something rather than just reviewing it. So,
yeah, and I think, and John, and I, when I first, I'm just like a big surprise. Deadlight headlights, move forward. Talk no filter, and I got pushed back a couple times and reminded that look, you're reviewing the qualifications of the equipment, not the validity or the necessity of the purchase. And I believe it's in our guidance policies that represent the different commissions or committees, but I don't know that for sure. And I don't know if it's part of our charter or where that comes from. So I think we need to look at that to make sure we do it properly. But I think in respect to our staff, that's really where it needs to happen, because what we did tonight is I think we made a good decision, but it really feels disrespectful, and I don't want to disrespect our staff. And I feel like that's what I did. I still think it's the right decision. I think there's things we could consider and flush out that wouldn't happen at the meeting, because I think our citizens deserve to have the process done well. They don't always, I think, need to have it done publicly, but need to know the results. So I appreciate that, John. And Mr. Mayor, if I could, I'd like to add one thing. In my tribute to what happened today.
Let me just jump in there before you switch.
Okay.
I'll come right back to you.
Yeah, thank you.
That's not in the charter. I think that's more of an administrative policy, so Sharon, would you follow up on that?
I certainly can. I just want to add to, obviously we don't always look back, but my understanding, and I'm going to give a nod to a past councilman, Councilman Dan Ritter, was pretty passionate about routine scheduling of replacement of vehicles. He knew firsthand, based on his own business, on the cost of maintaining if you own them past a certain time. So I think Jason alluded to this as well, as getting us on some kind of schedule. I would wish or hope, if we do change the scope, I always kind of said we should have a CIP committee, another acronym I know, but certainly I think that committee could review this type of schedule as well as part of that process. I think that would be included.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the tribute to the fire department, I left out one very critical group, and very few of those firefighters are independently employed. So all of them are employees of our local businesses and our employers, and firemen can't leave and respond to the page if they're not allowed to do that. And I know that, Councilman Lozinski is an employer that employs a firefighter, and, without those participating and supporting employers, that weakens our fire department too. And I didn't give them tribute, and I want to do that too. And I know the rest of the council, because we talked about it before we came into session, we were talking about the fire, and it takes the whole community to do this, and I'm so grateful for what we have here.
John, anything more?
No, not net, no.
The only two things, there's been plenty of comments about the events Friday evening, the Light Up the Night. I'd also add two other events that are going on Friday afternoon, the retirement of Glenn Christensen with our Parks Department and the retirement of Rob Yan. Both of those open houses are Friday afternoon just prior to the Light Up the Night parade. With that, we'll move then to agenda item number 18, which is staff report. Sharon.
Mr. Mayor and Councilmen, two quick items. One, in the spirit of the holidays and the Light Up the Night parade, one of the things that the Park and Rec Department did, more so specific to Preston Stensrud, he did spend a few dollars and created a holiday wreath that is placed in front of City Hall or on City Hall. And so if you get a chance, most people don't look at City Hall anymore, but we did try to make it look a little more festive. And it doesn't mean that we shouldn't renovate City Hall, for the record, but it does add a little more look to it. And I thought Preston did a really good job, so if you get a chance. Second thing is I did get an opportunity the week before Thanksgiving to go to a Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities conference, and the great thing about that particular association is the membership is small enough where you can connect with other administrators and some of the elected officials. I did connect with the city of Laverne and specifically talked about True Shrimp, and I have a phone call exchange with the city administrator from Laverne, so I think we'll have some further discussions there, sharing information. And then secondly, I had a really good conversation with a Willmar City Council person, and we just kind of talked about Marshall and Willmar and comparing it. I know we sometimes compare to Willmar, they're a regional center, and so is Marshall. And interestingly enough, I just want to mention that at the last election in November, that Willmar now has approved a 0.5% sales tax, and some of that revenue is going to go towards a rec and event center. Some of the money is going to go to softball and baseball and multi-purpose athletic fields. There's also going to be some dollars put towards stormwater management infrastructure, about $7 million, and then also $2 million to replace the Willmar Community Center. So I'm not validating per se what's already occurred in Marshall, because we know that 61% approved it here in Marshall, but it does seem, as local government aid and other revenue sources remain flat, cities similar to the size of Marshall and Willmar are seeking out outside sources of revenue, and I thought it was kind of interesting to have it listed out. And their approval of that sales tax, I think, was about 60% as well. So it was good to talk to that Willmar City Council person and just kind of get some feedback on how that went. That's all I had, Mr. Mayor.
Let me just add two items to your report, Sharon, if I can. One is yesterday, City Administrator Hansen and I presented a State of the City report to the Avera Systems Board, which is not just the Avera Board here, but their larger systems, if you're familiar with that. So, and Sharon did a very nice job. Sharon also facilitated a strategic planning session today with constituents of the Red Baron Arena that are users, and that includes Schwans and Maha and Minnesota Hockey and the Schwans Super Rink representatives, as well as the Sports Commission leaders. So did a nice job with that. With that then, Glenn.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Just a couple of small things. This is one of our first years that we've had significant river flowing through the community, and I don't know where it's all coming from because we don't get a whole lot of snow that turns into rain or to runoff this time of year. But the river has not only leveled off but increased from the last snow showers. So in line with that, we've had continuing issues with sump pump discharges that occur that have typically been discharging out to people's grass, and it doesn't get to the street. Well, we had a lot of complaints about some pump discharges onto the sidewalks and the streets. We did send letters to each of the, we had about 60 complaints citywide, which is quite a few. And many of them came in for the new permit for discharging to the sanitary sewer. So we want to just reiterate that that process is ongoing. We're continuing to have some pump discharges this late in the season, and for people to watch out for that because it is slippery and contributes to a nuisance complaints on the streets and in sidewalks and driveways. So keep that in mind. Also, I want to comment on the fire today too. Really, everyone stepping forward, and kudos to Studio One, who apparently put together a video with a drone that was asked for by at least 2 news companies in the region. So I don't know, I haven't looked at it yet. Six companies. So it does show the expertise and the ability of our system to do things like that. And after the fact, there's going to be some review by the fire department, by private entities of what does that look like? What happened? Where did it go? How did it progress? That's a real valuable tool that we have. So I wanted to thank him for that. That's all.
Okay, thank you, Glenn. Dennis?
Just glad to be here.
Yeah.
John?
I just want to add in there, you reminded me with the comment on Studio One that Studio One also did a video of the change out that MMU is making to the automatic meter reading, and which, by the way, is now put into full swing. So they are full bore going at replacing all the water meters and the electrical meters, but that's also out on the Studio One site and the YouTube. So if you want to know what may be happening inside your house and outside your house and about how long it's going to take, go take a look at the video. It's about a 3-minute, 5-minute video in there, so it's not a real long viewing and gives you very good information on what's going on. So,
Thank you, John. We'll move then to agenda item number 21, which is our administrative reports that you have for your review. Agenda item number 22 is the information items, including the building permits. Agenda item number 23 is our listing of upcoming meetings, including 1 week from tonight at 6 o'clock p.m. will be the Truth and Taxation hearing. And then finally agenda item number 24. Is there anything prior to agenda item number 24 anyone wants to make any comments on? Agenda item number 24 is to consider adjourning. I'd entertain a motion.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Steve, seconded by Jim to adjourn discussion. If not, we'll move to a vote.
Oh.
Motion passes. We're adjourned.